Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is Ivan Jue. I teach international business at Cerritos College. Today, we will discuss international cooperation among nations, one of the most important topics in international business. In previous chapters, we learned about tariffs, quotas, and non-tariff barriers that restrict trade. In this chapter, we will examine how countries work together to reduce these barriers and create larger markets through international agreements and regional economic integration. So let's begin. So after today's lecture, you should be able to explain the importance of the GATT and WTO, compare the 5 forms of economic integration, understand the development of the European Union, identify major trading blocs around the world, analyze the opportunities and risks international businesses face due to economic integration. So this explains the historical evolution from the International Trade Organization, or ITO, to GATT, and eventually the World Trade Organization, the WTO. After World War II, countries want to create an organization to regulate and promote international trade. The proposed organization was called the International Trade Organization, or ITO. However, the ITO was never formally established because key countries, especially the United States Congress, did not approve it. Therefore, the ITO never came into being. Since the ITO failed, countries relied on the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, or GATT, signed in 1947. GATT was originally intended to be a temporary agreement, but it became the primary framework governing international trade for nearly 50 years. Its mission was to reduce tariffs, or import taxes, eliminate trade barriers, and promote freer international trade. Through several rounds of negotiations, GATT helped significantly lower tariffs worldwide. In 1995, the World Trade Organization, WTO, was created. The WTO adopted and expanded GATT's mission. Compared with GATT, the WTO is a formal international organization, has a stronger dispute settlement system, covers not only trade in goods but also services under GATS, intellectual property under TRIPS, and trade dispute resolution. Think of it like this. The ITO, in this case, the company that was planned but never opened, GATT, the temporary office that operated for decades, the WTO, the permanent headquarters that eventually replaced the temporary office and expanded its responsibilities. The primary goal of GATT was to reduce tariffs, or import taxes, remove trade barriers, encourage competition, and increase international trade. The basic idea was that when countries trade more freely, consumers get lower prices, businesses gain access to larger markets, resources are used more efficiently, and economic growth increases. One of GATT's most important rules is the most favored nation, or MFN, principle. So what does MFN mean? If country A gives a favorable tariff rate to country B, it must give the same favorable rate to all other GATT or WTO members. So for example, if the United States lowers its tariff on Japanese cars from 10% to 5%, under MFN, Germany gets 5%, France gets 5%, Canada gets 5%, and so on. The U.S. cannot selectively favor one country while discriminating against others. This prevents discrimination and creates equal trading opportunities. Exceptions to MFN. So this slide lists 2 important exceptions. Number 1, Generalized System of Preferences, or GSP. Developed countries may offer lower tariffs to developing countries. So the U.S. may allow certain products from developing countries to enter duty-free to help their economic development. This exception exists because poorer countries may need special assistance to compete globally. Number 2, economic integration. Countries can form regional trade agreements and give each other better treatment. Examples are European Union or EU, MSMCA, formerly NAFTA and AFTA. Members of these groups may eliminate tariffs among themselves while maintaining tariffs against non-members. The table also shows the major rounds of trade negotiations. Three major milestones. Number 1, more countries joined over time. So in 1947, 23 countries joined. After the Uruguay round, 117 countries joined. And so this shows the growing participation in the global trade system. Number 2, tariffs kept falling. Many negotiation rounds achieved tariff cuts of roughly 25%, 33%, 35%. As tariffs declined, international trade increased. Global markets became more integrated. Export opportunities expanded. Number 3, the Uruguay round was historic. The Uruguay round from 1986 to 1994 was a very significant event. It reduced tariffs further, expanded rules to services and intellectual property, created the WTO in 1995. This round transformed the GATT from a trade agreement into the foundation of the modern global trading system. The World Trade Organization, or WTO, is an international organization that establishes and enforces the rules of international trade among nations. It was established on January 1st, 1995. It was created as a result of the Uruguay round of GATT negotiations. It replaced GATT as the main organization overseeing global trade. The headquarters is in Geneva, Switzerland. Membership has 164 countries. It represents the vast majority of world trade. Members agree to follow WTO trade rules. The WTO has 3 goals. Primary goal number 1 is to promote international trade. The WTO encourages countries to trade more freely with one another. How so? By negotiating trade agreements, lowering tariffs, reducing quotas, and increasing market access. The benefit is more exports, more imports, larger markets, and greater economic growth. Primary goal number 2, that is to reduce trade barriers. Trade barriers make international trade more difficult or expensive. Examples include tariffs, import quotas, subsidies, and licensing requirements. The WTO objective is to encourage countries to reduce these barriers so goods and services can move more freely across borders. Primary goal number 3, and that is to resolve trade disputes. Countries often disagree about trade practices. Examples would be one country accuses another of unfair subsidies. A country imposes tariffs that another country believes violates WTO rules. A government blocks imports unfairly. The WTO provides a formal process to settle these disputes. So why is the WTO important? Without an organization like the WTO, countries could impose tariffs whenever they want. Trade disputes could become political conflicts. Businesses would face greater uncertainty when selling internationally. The WTO creates a predictable system of rules that helps countries trade with confidence. This explains the 5 core principles of the WTO trading system. These principles are designed to create a fair, stable, and efficient environment for global trade. There are 5 WTO principles of the trading system. Number 1, without discrimination. Countries should treat all WTO members fairly and equally. There are 2 key rules. A, most favored nation, MFN. If a country gives a trade advantage to one WTO member, it must give the same advantage to all WTO members. B, national treatment. Once imported products enter a country, they should be treated the same as domestic products. This is to prevent unfair discrimination and favoritism. Number 2, freer trade. Countries should reduce barriers to trade through negotiations. Trade barriers include tariffs, import quotas, licensing restrictions, and other non-tariff barriers. The WTO goal is to gradually make global trade more open and accessible. Number 3, predictable. Countries should not suddenly change trade rules. Businesses need certainty when investing internationally. The WTO encourages governments to commit to tariff limits, follow agreed trade rules, avoid arbitrary policy changes. The benefit is that this creates confidence for investors, exporters, and importers. Number 4, more competitive. The WTO promotes fair competition. It discourages unfair practices such as export subsidies, governments paying companies to sell products abroad at artificially low prices, and dumping, selling products overseas below overproduction costs to drive competitors out of business. The goal here is for a competition that should be based on efficiency, innovation, product quality, and not government favoritism. And number 5, beneficial for less developed countries. Developing countries often need additional support to participate in global trade. The WTO gives them more time to implement agreements, greater flexibility, and special privileges and assistance. The purpose is to help developing economies integrate into world markets, increase exports, and improve economic growth. There are 2 major advantages of the WTO over GATT. While both organizations aim to promote free trade, the WTO is much more powerful and comprehensive than GATT. The first is a broader mandate. GATT is mainly focused on trade in goods or physical products, tariff reductions, import and export barriers. Examples would be automobiles, electronics, agricultural products, and steel. The WTO covers everything GATT covered plus several additional areas. A. Trade in goods, which are inherited from GATT. B. Trade in services, governed by the General Agreement on Trade and Services, or GATS. Examples would be banking, insurance, and telecommunications. C. Intellectual property rights. This is governed by TRIPS, TRIPS, trade-related aspects of intellectual property rights. Examples would be patents, copyrights, and trademarks. D. Investment-related measures, rules affecting foreign investors and multinational companies. So number 2, stronger enforcement powers. Under GATT, dispute resolutions were relatively weak. Countries could often block decisions. Enforcement depended heavily on voluntary cooperation. As a result, some countries ignored rulings. The WTO created a formal dispute settlement body, or DSB. When a trade dispute occurs, a country files a complaint. WTO experts review the case. A ruling is issued. The losing country is expected to comply. If it does not comply, the winning country may receive permission to impose retaliatory tariffs or sanctions. There are 6 major challenges and controversies faced by the WTO as it tries to regulate modern global trade. The WTO's responsibilities go far beyond reducing tariffs. As global trade has become more complex, the WTO must deal with issues involving services, intellectual property, investment, and political disagreements. So number 1, General Agreement on Trade and Services, or GATS. GATS extends WTO rules to services, not just physical goods. Examples of services would be banking, insurance, and telecommunications. This is challenging because many countries want to protect their domestic service industries. The WTO must balance free trade in services and national economic and security concerns. Number 2, trade-related aspects of intellectual property rights, or TRIPS, TRIPS. TRIPS establishes minimum international standards for protecting intellectual property. It covers patents, copyrights, and trademarks. This is controversial because developing countries often argue that strict patent protection increases drug prices and limits access to medicines. It also benefits large multinational corporations. In essence, the challenge is balancing innovation incentives versus public access and affordability. Number 3, trade-related investment measures, or TRIMS, TRAMS. TRIMS regulates government policies affecting foreign investment. The WTO often views these requirements as trade distortions. The challenge is that countries want to attract foreign investment while also protecting domestic industries and jobs. Number 4, enforcement of WTO decisions. The WTO can issue rulings, but it does not have a military, police powers, or direct enforcement authority. If one country violates WTO rules, the WTO issues a ruling, the country is asked to comply. If it refuses, the injured country may impose retaliatory tariffs. The challenge here is that large economies sometimes have more leverage than smaller countries, making enforcement difficult. Number 5, deadlock over the Doha round negotiations. The Doha Development Round is a major WTO negotiation launched in 2001 aimed at further reducing trade barriers, helping developing countries, and reforming agricultural trade. The negotiations stalled because developed countries and developing countries disagreed on agricultural subsidies, market access, industrial tariffs, services liberalization. As a result, years of negotiations produced limited progress, highlighting the difficulty of reaching agreements among many countries with different interests. And number 6, opposition to WTO actions. Critics argue that the WTO reduces national sovereignty, benefits multinational corporations, encourages outsourcing, may weaken labor protections, and may weaken environmental protections. Supporters, however, argue that the WTO promotes economic growth, increases consumer choice, reduces trade conflicts, improves global prosperity. An example would be that many WTO meetings have faced protests from labor unions, environmental groups, anti-globalization organizations because they believe globalization does not benefit everyone equally. This explains the 5 different levels of regional economic integration. As countries become more integrated, they remove more barriers to trade and coordinate more of their economic and political policies. The arrow on the left shows the degree of integration, moving from low at the bottom to high at the top. Number 1, Free Trade Area, or FTA. This is the lowest level of integration. Characteristics would be members eliminate tariffs and trade barriers among themselves. Each country keeps its own trade policies towards non-member countries. Number 2, Customs Union. Characteristics would be everything in the free trade area plus members adopt a common external tariff against non-member countries. Number 3, Common Market. Characteristics would be everything in the customs union plus free movement of factors of production, such as labor, capital, and technology. Workers and businesses can move freely among member countries. Number 4, Economic Union. Characteristics would be everything in a common market plus coordination of economic policies. Countries may coordinate monetary policy, fiscal policy, banking regulations, and economic regulations. And number 5, Political Union. This is the highest level of integration. Characteristics would be everything in an economic union plus political integration, shared government institutions, common laws and policies, the group begins functioning almost like a single country. So this slide focuses on the Free Trade Area, or FTA, which is the simplest form of regional economic integration. This eliminates trade barriers among members. The countries in a free trade area agree to remove tariffs, import quotas, other trade restrictions when trading with each other. The benefits would be lower prices for consumers, larger markets for business, increased trade and economic growth. Under FTA, each member establishes its own trade policies against non-members. Unlike a customs union, FTA members do not have a common external tariff. Each country can decide its own tariffs on imports from countries outside the agreement. However, this creates a problem called trade deflection. So what is trade deflection? This is when foreign producers will try to enter an FTA through the member country with the lowest tariff. To prevent trade deflection, FTAs use rules of origin. What are rules of origin? Rules that determine whether a product actually originates within the FTA and therefore qualifies for preferential treatment. As an example, under the MSMCA for the automobile industry, a vehicle must contain a high percentage of North American content to qualify for tariff-free treatment. If a Chinese company simply ships parts to Mexico and performs minimum assembly, the vehicle may fail the rules of origin test. So why do the rules of origin matter? Well, without them, companies could easily bypass tariffs. Trade policies would become ineffective. Countries could lose tariff revenue. Rules of origin protect the integrity of the free trade area. So this explains the customs union, which is the next level of economic integration above a free trade area. A customs union has two main features. Number one, it eliminates internal trade barriers. So among members, like a free trade area, a member country can remove tariffs, import quotas, and other trade restrictions when trading with each other. The benefit is more trade will happen among member countries, lower prices for consumers, and greater market access for businesses. The customs union adopts common external trade policies towards non-members. This is the key difference between a customs union and a free trade area. In a customs union, all members charge the same tariff on imports from non-member countries. Members negotiate trade policies together. In the customs union, the goal is to minimize the trade deflection problem. As an example, in a free trade area, country A tariff on Chinese TVs is 20%. Country B tariff on Chinese TVs is 5%. So Chinese exporters would ship products through country B and then move them tariff-free to country A. This is called trade deflection. So this slide explains the common market, which is the third level of regional economic integration after a free trade area and customs union. A common market includes everything in a customs union plus free movement of factors of production. So what is a common market? A common market has three key characteristics. Number one, eliminates internal trade barriers among members. This is like an FTA and customs union. There are no tariffs among member countries, no import quotas among members. Goods move freely within the market. The benefit is increased trade, larger customer markets, and lower costs. Number two, adopts a common external trade policy towards non-members. Like a customs union, all members use the same trade policy towards countries outside the group. Members negotiate trade agreements together. The benefit is that this prevents trade deflection, and it also creates a unified trade policy. Number three, eliminates barriers to the movement of factors of production. This is the new feature that makes a common market different from a customs union. Factors of production. This is where economists generally identify 4 factors of production: labor, including workers; capital, money, and investments; land; entrepreneurship. A common market allows these resources to move freely among member countries. So this also allows free movement of labor. Workers can live and work in any member country. The benefit is that workers move where jobs are available. It also allows free movement of capital. Money and investments can move freely. The benefit here is that capital flows to where it can be used most efficiently. It also allows free movement of business operations, so companies can establish operations throughout the common market. The benefit is that this creates larger and more efficient businesses. This slide explains the economic union, which is one step above a common market and represents a very high level of economic integration among countries. So what is an economic union? An economic union combines free trade among members, a common external trade policy, free movement of labor and capital, and coordination of economic policies. The components of an economic union. Number 1, and that is to eliminate internal trade barriers. Like all higher forms of integration, no tariffs among member countries, no import quotas among members. Goods and services move freely. The benefit will be more trade, lower costs, and larger markets. Number 2, adopt common external trade policies. Like a customs union and common market, members use the same tariffs towards non-member countries. Trade agreements are negotiated collectively. The benefit here is for preventing trade deflection and creating a unified trade position. Number 3, abolish restrictions on the mobility of factors of production. This feature comes from the common market level. So with labor mobility, workers can move freely. As an example, a Spanish engineer can work in Germany. A French accountant can work in Italy. Capital mobility. Money and investments move freely. So as an example, a Dutch company can invest in a factory in Belgium. The benefit is that resources flow to where they are most productive. Number 4, coordinate economic policies. This is what makes an economic union different from a common market. Members coordinate policies such as monetary policy, interest rates, money supply, currency management, fiscal policy, and so on. Why is this called full economic integration? This is due to representing full integration of the economies of 2 or more countries. That's because goods move freely, services move freely, workers move freely, capital moves freely, governments coordinate economic decisions. At this stage, the economies begin functioning almost like one economy. Okay, so this explains the highest level of regional economic integration, the political union. A political union goes beyond economic cooperation and creates both economic and political integration among member countries. So what's a political union? A political union exists when 2 or more countries effectively function as a single nation in both economic and political matters. The slide defines it as a complete political and economic integration of 2 or more countries. This means member countries share economic policies, political institutions, laws and regulations, and government decision making. What does a political union include? It contains all of the features of the previous levels, such as FTA, no tariffs among members, customs union, common external tariff, and a common market, as well as the economic union's coordinated economic policies. However, there's also shared political authority. So there's 4 characteristics of a political union. Number 1, common government institutions. Members may share legislature, courts, and executive agencies. Number 2, common laws. Members follow common legal standards. Number 3, common foreign policy. So members may coordinate diplomacy, international agreements, and defense policies. Number 4, possible common currency. Many political unions share a common currency. So example, the United States, one currency, US dollar, one central government, one constitution. In fact, the United States is the best example of a political union, as it has the 50 states that trade freely, share one currency, follow federal laws, elect one national government, and the states are politically united. The European Union is often considered the closest modern international example. The EU has common market, common institutions, European Parliament, European Court of Justice, and euro currency for many members. However, the EU is not yet a full political union because member countries still maintain independent governments, separate militaries, and independent foreign policies in many areas. So this summarizes the advantages and disadvantages of regional economic integration from the perspective of businesses. Economic integration creates larger markets and more opportunities, but it also increases competition and can hurt some industries. There are 3 pros of economic integration. Number 1, open markets of member countries. What does it mean? Companies gain access to a much larger market. Instead of selling only in their home country, they can sell throughout the integrated region. Number 2, lower production and distribution costs. Why? Economic integration removes barriers such as tariffs, customs procedures, border delays, and restrictions on labor and capital movement. Number 3, improve international competitiveness. Why is that? Larger markets allow firms to achieve economies of scale. Companies can produce larger quantities and spread fixed costs over more units. Here are the cons of economic integration. Number 1, it threatens less efficient firms. What happens? When trade barriers disappear, local companies face stronger competition from foreign firms. Number 2, it harms specific sectors of the economy. While the economy as a whole may benefit, some industries can suffer. Number 3, it favors powerful special interest groups. So large corporations often have more influence over trade negotiations than smaller businesses. As an example, a large multinational company may lobby for trade rules that benefit its industry. Smaller firms may have less influence. The concern here is that some critics argue that economic integration can disproportionately benefit large corporations, financial institutions, and politically connected industries. So this introduces the European Union, EU, and shows how it expanded over time from a small group of countries into one of the world's largest economic blocs. The European Union is the most advanced example of regional economic integration in the world. It combines features of a common market, an economic union, some elements of a political union. Today, EU members enjoy free trade among member countries, free movement of people, capital, goods, and services, common regulations and policies, and a common currency, the euro, for many members. The different colors of this map indicate when countries joined the EU. The original 6 members are in light blue. These countries founded the European integration movement in the 1950s. These would be France, Germany, Italy, Belgium, Netherlands, and Luxembourg. These countries formed the foundation of today's EU. There was a major expansion in the 1970s and 80s, and these are shown in darker blue. The new members included the United Kingdom before Brexit, Ireland, Denmark, Greece, Spain, and Portugal. Expansion in 1995 are the countries shown in green. These countries that joined were Austria, Sweden, and Finland. Then in 2004, a major expansion happened, and these are shown in orange. These countries included Poland, Czech Republic, Slovakia, Hungary, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Cyprus, Malta. Many of these countries were formerly part of the Soviet sphere of influence. And then in 2007, in purple, Romania and Bulgaria. In lavender, in 2013, Croatia joined. So why did the EU expand? The goals were to create a larger market, increase trade, promote economic growth, and encourage investment. It also is designed to promote peace after World War II, strengthen democracy, and improve cooperation among European countries. Why is the EU important? The EU is one of the largest economic regions in the world. It allows free movement of goods, free movement of workers, free movement of capital, common regulations. Many members also share the euro. This slide summarizes the history and evolution of the European Union by showing how a small economic partnership gradually developed into today's European Union. The Treaty of Rome in 1957. This is where European economic integration officially began. The 6 founding countries that signed the Treaty of Rome in 1957 were France, West Germany, Italy, Belgium, Netherlands, and Luxembourg. The result is that they created the European Economic Community, or EEC. The goal is to promote trade, encourage economic cooperation, prevent future wars in Europe. So think of the EEC as the birth of the modern EU. The expansion of the European community. In the 1970s, new members joined. United Kingdom, Denmark, Ireland. In the 1980s, further expansion with additional members, Greece, Portugal, Spain. The organization became known as the European Community. With the Treaty of the Maastricht in 1993, one of the most important events had happened. In this case, 12 EC countries signed the Treaty of Maastricht. The result is that the European Community officially became the European Union. The treaty expanded cooperation beyond trade into economic policy, political cooperation, monetary integration, foreign policy coordination. This marked the transition from a simple economic community to a much deeper union. And then in 1995, the EU continued to expand. 3 countries joined: Austria, Finland, and Sweden. In 2004, the largest expansion happened yet. 10 countries joined: Cyprus, Czech Republic, Estonia, Hungary, Latvia, Lithuania, Malta, Poland, Slovakia, and Slovenia. And again, most of these countries were former communist states from Eastern Europe. In 2007, 2 more countries joined: Bulgaria and Romania. 2013, Croatia joined. So total membership reached 28 countries. However, this final bullet shows that one of the biggest challenges that happened in EU history, and that was Brexit. This is when the United Kingdom leaves. In June of 2016, British voters held a referendum and voted to leave the EU. This became known as Brexit. Why? Supporters argued that the UK should regain control over immigration policy, trade policy, and laws and regulations. As a result, the UK formally left the EU in 2020. The slide lists a planned March 2019 exit date, but the actual withdrawal occurred on January 31st, 2020. So this explains the main governing institutions of the European Union. Think of these institutions as similar to the branches of a national government, with different organizations responsible for setting policies, passing laws, implementing decisions, and interpreting laws. The European Council location is in Brussels. Who participates? Heads of state or government of each EU member country. Examples would be presidents, prime ministers, or chancellors. The main role is to set the overall direction and priorities of the EU. Think of it as the EU's strategic leadership team. So as an example, the European Council may decide on climate goals, expansion of the EU, foreign policy priorities, major economic initiatives. It does not normally pass laws. The Council of the European Union, location in Brussels. Who participates? Government ministers from member countries. So examples would be finance ministers, agricultural ministers, or trade ministers. The main role is to help pass EU laws and coordinate policies. So think of this as the upper legislative chamber representing member governments. The European Commission, location again is in Brussels. Main role is to act as the executive branch of the EU. Responsibilities would include proposing new laws, enforcing EU regulations, implementing EU policies, and the EU budget. So think of this as the EU's executive branch, similar to a cabinet or administration. European Parliament, location is in Strasbourg. Who participates? Members directly elected by the EU citizens. Main role is for debating legislation, approving laws, overseeing EU institutions, and approving the budget. Think of this as the EU's legislature representing the people. And then 5, European Court of Justice. Location is in Luxembourg. Main role is to interpret EU law and resolve legal disputes. Responsibilities include ensuring EU laws are applied consistently. This helps to resolve disputes among member countries, EU institutions, businesses, and individuals. Think of this as the Supreme Court of the EU. This slide focuses specifically on the European Council, which is the EU's highest level political body and is responsible for setting the overall direction of the European Union. The European Council brings together the top political leaders of all EU member countries. Its main job is to set long-term goals, determine major political priorities, address major challenges facing the EU. It does not usually make laws, but it decides the overall direction the EU should take. It convenes twice every 6 months. This means the European Council meets regularly throughout the year. In practice, leaders gather for official summits to discuss major issues such as economic growth, immigration, climate change, security, and foreign policy. It also shapes the EU's political priorities and policy agendas. This is the Council's most important function. The European Council decides what issues are most important. Examples would be green energy transition, digital transformation, defense cooperation, economic recovery. Think of this as a company's board of directors setting the strategic plan. The European Commission then develops specific policies to achieve those goals. Decisions are usually made on consensus. So consensus means members try to reach agreement together. Decisions are generally not imposed by a simple majority vote. Why is that? That's because the EU countries are sovereign nations. Major decisions work best when everyone supports them. Who attends the European Council? The slide shows 3 groups. A, members of state, heads of state, or government from each member state. There are the top leaders of each EU country. B, president of the European Council. This person chairs meetings, organizes agendas, helps build consensus among member countries. Think of this person as the meeting facilitator and strategic coordinator. And then C, President of the European Commission. The President of the European Commission also participates because the Commission proposes EU policies. The Commission implements EU decisions. This helps connect strategy with execution. This explains the Council of the European Union, often called the Council of Ministers. It is one of the EU's main lawmaking institutions and represents the governments of the member countries. The Council of the European Union is made up of representatives from each member country. Unlike the European Parliament, which represents citizens, the Council of the EU represents the national governments. So who attends? The members change depending on the topic being discussed. Each EU country sends government ministers to participate in decision making. The Council is the EU's most powerful decision-making body. Why is that? Because many important EU laws cannot be adopted without Council approval. The Council passes legislation together with the European Parliament, approves the EU budget, coordinates national policies, negotiates international agreements, and makes foreign policy decisions. There's two important voting methods. Number one, unanimous approval. What does that mean? Every member country must agree. One country can block the proposal. This is used for highly sensitive issues such as taxation, treaty changes, and admission of new states. Number two, qualified majority voting, or QMV. Most EU decisions use this method. So what does this mean? A proposal passes if a large majority of countries support it, and those countries represent a large majority of the EU population. This prevents large countries from dominating or small countries from blocking everything. This slide explains the European Commission, which serves as the executive branch of the European Union. If the European Council sets the strategy and the Council of the EU, European Parliament pass laws, then the European Commission is responsible for making sure things actually get done. The European Commission represents the interests of the EU as a whole rather than the interests of individual member countries. So think of it as the EU's executive management team. One of the Commission's most important powers is that it has the right to initiate legislation. What does this mean? Most EU laws begin with a proposal from the European Commission. The key point is that the Commission proposes laws. It generally does not pass the laws itself. The EU is also governed by treaties signed by member countries. Examples include Treaty of Rome, the Maastricht Treaty, Lisbon Treaty. The Commission ensures that these treaties are carried out properly. It also protects the interests of the EU, so unlike national governments, the Commission members are expected to represent the interests of the entire EU. It also wields broad implementation powers. After laws are approved, someone must put them into practice. The Commission issues regulations, develops implementation procedures, monitors compliance, and manages programs and funding. And then it also administers the EU's bureaucracy. The Commission manages the day-to-day operations of the EU. So the responsibilities include managing EU programs, administering the EU budget, supervising thousands of EU employees, conducting trade negotiations, and enforcing competition laws. So this slide represents the European Parliament, which is the EU institution that directly represents the citizens of member countries. Think of this as the EU's version of the Congress or House of Representatives. Seats are allocated in rough proportion to a country's population. So countries with larger populations receive more seats in the European Parliament than smaller countries. It was originally the weakest of the EU's governing bodies. When the European Community first started, the Parliament had very limited authority. In its early role, it mostly discussed politics, provide options, advised other EU institutions, but had little power to pass laws, control a budget, or influence major policy decisions. At that time, the real power rested with the Council of the EU and the European Commission. However, it gained increased powers over time. Over several decades, the EU treaties gradually strengthened the Parliament. So today, the European Parliament has significant powers. The Parliament works with the Council of the EU to pass EU laws, amend legislation, and improve regulations. For budget powers, the Parliament helps to approve the EU budget and monitor spending. For oversight powers, the Parliament can question the European Commission, investigate issues, approve or reject Commission leadership appointments. So, how is the European Parliament different? It represents the EU citizens. Members are directly elected by voters. The Council of the EU represents the national governments. Members are government ministers. So this explains the role of the European Court of Justice, which serves as the highest court of the European Union. Think of this as the EU's equivalent of the Supreme Court. The European Court of Justice is responsible for interpreting EU law. It also helps to ensure compliance with the EU law. So its mission is to make sure the EU laws are applied consistently across all member countries. The location is in Luxembourg. So it interprets EU law, but what does that mean? Sometimes the EU laws are unclear or countries interpret them differently. The ECJ decides what the EU laws mean, how they should be applied, whether national laws conflict with EU law. So why is this important? Without a common interpretation, different countries would apply EU laws differently. Businesses would face uncertainty. The ECJ helps to ensure consistency across the EU. It also ensures compliance. The court makes sure that member countries follow EU treaties. Governments obey EU regulations. EU institutions follow the law. So here are the types of cases that the ECJ handles. A. Member state versus member state. B. European Commission versus member state. C. Businesses versus EU institutions. D. National courts request guidance. So why is the ECJ important? The EU operates under one set of laws across many countries. Without the ECJ, countries could interpret laws differently. Rules could become inconsistent. The common market will not function effectively. The ECJ helps to maintain legal consistency, fairness, stability, and equal treatment across the EU. So this slide explains how laws are made in the European Union and the roles played by major institutions. The catchphrase is the Commission proposes, the Parliament advises, and the Council disposes. This is an easy way to remember the legislative process. So, what does this all mean? European Commission proposes. The European Commission drafts and introduces new laws. It is the only major EU institution with the formal power to initiate most legislation. Number 2, European Parliament reviews and debates. The European Parliament, which represents EU citizens, examines the proposal, it debates, suggests amendments, and votes on the legislation. Think of Parliament as the voice of the people. And then Council of the European Union decides. The Council of the European Union represents the member governments, reviews the proposal, it negotiates and votes on whether the law should be adopted. Think of the Council as the voice of the member states. And then the co-decision procedure. So the slide mentions about the co-decision procedure. Today is often called the ordinary legislative procedure. Under this system, both institutions must agree. So the European Parliament represents citizens, Council of the European Union represents national governments. A law generally cannot be adopted unless both approve it. This explains how the European Union worked to create a true common market where goods, services, capital, and people can move freely across member countries. Even after tariffs were removed, many barriers still existed because each country had different laws, regulations, and standards. The EU used 4 major initiatives to overcome these obstacles. What is harmonization? Harmonization means making rules and standards more similar across member countries. Why was it needed? Different countries had different product safety standards, labeling requirements, professional licensing rules, environmental regulations. These differences acted as hidden trade barriers. What is mutual recognition? If a product is legally sold in one EU country, other EU countries should generally allow it as well. The White Paper. What was it? In 1985, the European Commission published a document known as the White Paper on Completing the Internal Market. The purpose was that it identified hundreds of barriers preventing a fully integrated market. The White Paper proposed actions to eliminate these obstacles. The focus areas included physical barriers, technical barriers, and fiscal barriers. The importance is that it became the blueprint for creating the EU's single market. The Single European Act, or SEA. What was it? The Single European Act was signed in 1986. It was the first major revision of the Treaty of Rome. The main goal was to create a complete European single market by 1992. The key changes with this is that it accelerated removal of trade barriers, increased cooperation among member countries, expanded use of majority voting to make decisions faster. The result is that the EU made significant progress towards becoming a true common market. So this explains the major treaties that transformed Europe from a simple common market into the modern European Union with deeper economic and political integration. Think of this as the evolution of European integration. The Maastricht Treaty, 1993. The Maastricht Treaty officially created the European Union. Key achievement is that it had created the Economic and Monetary Union, or EMU. The EMU aimed to coordinate economic policies, create a common currency, strengthen economic integration. The result is that it eventually led to the introduction of the euro, used by many EU countries today. Why does it matter? Before Maastricht, mainly an economic community was expected of the EU. After Maastricht, a broader political and economic union developed. Treaty of Amsterdam, 1997. This slide refers to the Treaty for Europe, or Treaty of Amsterdam. The purpose is to improve the functioning of the growing EU. The main goals were to increase cooperation among member states, strengthen citizens' rights, improve employment and social policies, as well as prepare for future expansion. Why is this needed? The EU is preparing to admit many new countries from Eastern Europe. Treaty of Nice, 2001. The purpose was to prepare the EU for major enlargement. Key changes included reforming EU institutions by adjusting voting rules, changing seat allocations, and modifying decision-making procedures. Why? The EU was about to expand from 15 members to more than 25 members. Without reform, decision-making would become very difficult. Treaty of Lisbon in 2007, which became effective in 2009. This is often called the Reform Treaty. The purpose was to modernize EU guidance. The key reforms allow for a stronger European Parliament, increased democratic accountability, allow for a permanent president of the European Council, and improved continuity in leadership. This slide highlights some of the major challenges the European Union faces as it continues to integrate economically and politically. While the EU has been very successful in creating a large common market, several issues remain controversial. So, what is state aid? State aid occurs when a government provides financial support to domestic companies through subsidies, tax breaks, low interest loans, government guarantees. Why is it a challenge? The EU promotes fair competition. If one country heavily subsidizes its companies, those firms gain an unfair advantage over companies in other EU countries. The EU concern is that the European Commission often reviews state aid programs to determine whether they violate EU competition rules. What are corporate takeovers? A takeover occurs when one company acquires another company. Why is this controversial? The EU encourages a single market where companies can invest and acquire businesses across borders. However, governments sometimes resist foreign acquisitions of important domestic firms. So the challenge here is balancing free movement of capital with protection of strategic industries. What is CAP? The Common Agricultural Policy, or CAP, is the EU's agricultural support program. It provides farm subsidies, price supports, and rural development funding. So why is it controversial? CAP consumes a large portion of the EU budget. Critics argue it is expensive, it distorts markets, it benefits some countries more than others. Supporters, though, argue it protects farmers, ensures food security, and maintains rural communities. The challenge is finding a balance between supporting farmers and maintaining market efficiency. And then lack of democracy and accountability. This is often called the democratic deficit. What does this mean? Some critics believe EU institutions are too distant from ordinary citizens. People may feel decisions were made by unelected officials. EU regulations are often difficult to understand. Citizens have limited influence over policy decisions. Why is this important? Well, public dissatisfaction can lead to Euroscepticism, anti-EU political movements, and events such as Brexit. This introduces the North American Free Trade Agreement, or NAFTA, and its three primary goals. What was NAFTA? North American Free Trade Agreement was a free trade agreement between the United States, Canada, and Mexico. It took effect in 1994 and was later replaced in 2020 by the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, or MSMCA. It led to lower tariffs. Again, tariffs are taxes imposed on imported goods. NAFTA's goal was to reduce or eliminate tariffs among the three member countries. After NAFTA, many of those duties were reduced or eliminated. The benefits would mean lower prices, increased trade, and greater market access. It also reduced NTBs, or non-tariff barriers. What are these? These are trade restrictions other than tariffs, such as import quotas, licensing requirements, complex customs procedures, product standards. The benefits would be faster trade, lower compliance costs, and easier cross-border business. NAFTA also encouraged companies to invest across borders, boosting investments. Why? Because of lower labor costs, easier access to North American markets, more predictable investment rules. Similarly, Canadian firms invested in the United States, Mexican firms invested in Canada. The benefits would be increased foreign direct investment, or FDI, job creation, and economic growth. So why was NAFTA important? NAFTA created one of the world's largest free trade regions. The goals were to increase trade, increase investment, improve economic efficiency, and strengthen economic ties among three countries. The benefits and criticisms. Well, supporters argued, though, that it did increase trade, lower consumer prices, provide more investment, allow greater competitiveness, but Critics argued that some manufacturing jobs moved to Mexico, wage pressure in certain industries happened, an unequal distribution of benefits also happened. This slide introduces several important free trade agreements and regional economic integration efforts in the Americas, showing that NAFTA was not the only trade agreement in the Western Hemisphere. The Caribbean Basin Initiative, or CBI, is a U.S. trade program designed to encourage economic development in the Caribbean and Central American countries. Main features include providing preferential access to U.S. markets, reducing or eliminating tariffs on many imports from participating countries, and encouraging investment and job creation. The goal is to help smaller Caribbean economies grow through increased exports to the United States. The participants included Jamaica, Barbados, Trinidad and Tobago, and Belize. The Central American Dominican Republic Free Trade Agreement. Members are United States, Dominican Republic, Costa Rica, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, Nicaragua. The main objectives are to lower tariffs, increase trade, encourage investment, and improve intellectual property protection. It is similar to NAFTA. It also extends many NAFTA-style benefits to Central America and the Dominican Republic. The Mercosur Accord. What is Mercosur? Mercosur is South America's largest regional trade bloc. The major members here are Brazil, Argentina, Paraguay, Uruguay. The type of integration would be that Mercosur is more than a free trade area. It functions as a customs union, meaning that internal trade barriers are reduced. Members adopt a common external tariff toward non-members. The goal is to provide economic integration and trade within South America. The Andean Community. What is it? This is a regional economic organization among countries in the Andes region of South America. The members include Bolivia, Colombia, Ecuador, and Peru. The objectives were to promote free trade, coordinate economic policies, encourage regional development, and improve competitiveness. The goal is to move towards deeper economic integration among Andean nations. Why do all these agreements matter? All these agreements attempt to increase trade, reduce tariffs, encourage foreign investment, promote economic growth, and strengthen regional cooperation. However, they vary in how deeply they integrate member economies. This introduces the major trade arrangements and economic cooperation organizations in the Asia-Pacific region. Unlike the EU, most of these organizations focus on trade cooperation and economic integration rather than political integration. The slide highlights 4 important regional trade arrangements. This would include the ANZCRTA, ASEAN or ASEAN, APEC, APEC, and CPTPP. These agreements vary in how deeply they integrate member economies. So the first one is Australia-New Zealand Closer Economic Relations Trade Agreement, or CER. Members include Australia and New Zealand. The purpose is to create one of the world's most integrated bilateral free trade relationships. It features elimination of tariffs, free movement of most goods and services, and simplified business regulations. The significance is that this is often considered one of the most successful free trade agreements in the world. Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN. Members include Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, Thailand, and Vietnam, as well as a few other Southeast Asian nations. The goals are to promote economic growth, increase regional trade, maintain political stability, and encourage cooperation among members. The ASEAN has become one of the fastest growing economic regions in the world. Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation, or APEC. Members include United States, China, Japan, Australia, Canada, and South Korea. The purpose is to promote trade liberalization, economic cooperation, regional development. APEC, as a note, is not a free trade agreement. Instead, it is a forum where countries cooperate and coordinate economic policies. The Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, or CPTPP. This was developed after the United States withdrew from the original TPP. The members include Japan, Canada, Australia, Mexico, Vietnam, several others. The goals are to reduce tariffs, increase trade, protect intellectual property, encourage investment, and establish common trade rules. This is one of the largest modern free trade agreements in the world. This highlights three major regional economic integration initiatives in Africa. Like the EU, African countries have created regional organizations to promote trade, economic growth, and cooperation, although most are not as deeply integrated as the EU. Why African economic communities exist? Many African countries face challenges such as small domestic markets, infrastructure limitations, high trade costs, dependence on commodity exports. Regional cooperation helps countries increase trade, attract investment, improve economic development, and strengthen bargaining power globally. The Southern African Development Community, or SADC. Major members of this group would be South Africa, Botswana, Namibia, Zimbabwe, Zambia, and Mozambique. The objectives are to promote regional trade, encourage economic development, improve transportation and infrastructure, and reduce poverty. The Economic Monetary Community of Central Africa, or CEMAC. Members of this include Cameroon, Gabon, Chad, Republic of the Congo. A special feature of this is that, unlike many trade groups, the CEMAC includes a monetary union. Many members use the Central African CFA franc. The goals are for a common market, monetary stability, economic integration, and in many ways it's similar to the EU because members share a common currency. The Economic Community of the Western African States, or ECOWAS. Members include Nigeria, Ghana, Ivory Coast. The objectives here are to increase regional trade, promote economic integration, and facilitate movement of people. The importance is that Nigeria is the largest economy and most populous country in ECOWAS. Again, there are similarities with the EU. These organizations seek to reduce trade barriers, promote economic cooperation, increase regional trade, improve development. However, most African organizations are generally less integrated than the EU. Okay, so here are the review questions for this chapter. Number 1, what does most favored nation MFN mean? MFN, or most favored nation, is a WTO principle that requires a country to treat all WTO members equally in trade. In simple terms, if a country lowers a tariff or grants a trade benefit to one WTO member, it must generally offer the same treatment to all WTO members. The purpose is to prevent discrimination, promote fair competition, and encourage global trade. Number 2, under what conditions can WTO members not use MFN when dealing with one another? The main exception is when countries form regional trade agreements. Other exceptions would be special treatment for developing countries, anti-dumping duties, and national security exceptions. How does the WTO differ from GATT? Two major differences. A, Broader mandate. The WTO regulates goods, services, and intellectual property. B. Stronger enforcement. The WTO has a formal dispute settlement process that can authorize trade sanctions against violators. Number 4. How do the various forms of economic integration differ? The forms differ by the degree of integration. Here are the 5 levels of increasing integration. At the base is free trade area, then customs union, then common market, followed by economic union, and then finally political union. Number 5. Why do free trade areas develop rules of origin? The problem is trade deflection. Without rules, goods could enter through the member country with the lowest tariff and then move tariff-free throughout the trade area. So the solution would be the rules of origin, which determines whether a product was sufficiently produced within member countries to qualify for free trade benefits. The purpose is to prevent trade deflection, protect integrity of the agreement, and ensure benefits go to member country producers. Here are additional review questions for the chapter. Number 1. What was the goal of the Treaty of Rome? The Treaty of Rome was signed in 1957 by France, West Germany, Italy, Belgium, Netherlands, and Luxembourg. It established the European Economic Community, or EEC. The main goal is to create a common market among member countries by eliminating trade barriers, encouraging free movement of goods, encouraging free movement of labor, encouraging free movement of capital, and promoting economic growth and cooperation. Why? After World War II, European nations wanted greater economic cooperation to promote prosperity and reduce the likelihood of future conflicts. Number 2, describe the 5 major organizations governing the EU. Number 1, the European Council. The role is for it to set overall political direction and priorities. Members are heads of state, President of the European Council, President of the European Commission. Function is to establish broad EU goals and address major political issues. Number 2, Council of the European Union. The role is to provide a main decision-making body. Members include ministers from each member state. The function is to adopt laws, coordinate policies, and share legislative power with Parliament. Number 3, European Commission. The role of this is to become the executive branch of the EU. The function is to propose legislation, implement EU policies, and enforce treaties. Think of this as the EU's executive government. Number 4, European Parliament. This represents EU citizens. The members are directly elected representatives. The function is to review legislation and improve budgets. Number 5, European Court of Justice. It serves as the judicial branch. It interprets EU law and resolves disputes. Number 3, what are NAFTA's major provisions? NAFTA is the North American Free Trade Agreement, and it involved the United States, Canada, and Mexico. Major provisions include reducing or eliminating tariffs, lowering trade costs among members, and reducing non-tariff barriers, or NTBs. It also encouraged investment, protect investors, and make cross-border investment easier. The goal is to increase trade and economic integration across North America. NAFTA was later replaced by USMCA in 2020. Number 4, what is the Caribbean Basin Initiative, or CBI? What is its goal? The Caribbean Basin Initiative is a U.S. trade program that provides preferential access to the U.S. market for many Caribbean and Central American countries. The goal is to promote economic development, encourage exports, increase employment, and reduce poverty. How does it do it? By allowing many products to enter the U.S. duty-free. Number 5, what efforts have South American countries made to regionally integrate their economies? The two major integration efforts discussed in the chapter are the Mercosur Accord. Members include Brazil, Argentina, Paraguay, and Uruguay. The goals are to remove trade barriers, promote regional trade, and move towards a customs union. Number 2, the Andean Community. Members include Bolivia, Colombia, Ecuador, and Peru. Goals are to increase economic cooperation, promote trade among members, encourage regional development. And so now we've come to the end of this lecture. Thank you, everyone. I hope you all have found this useful. Please be sure to reach out to me if you have any questions. Take care, and I'll see you on the next video. Goodbye for now.